So I think I finally came up with a side-by-side comparison which is kind of objective. Hi fellow inline pilots, welcome to the channel and welcome to the follow-up of the previous video where I installed two separate bearings on both skates. And as a quick recap, the reason was that I've got the Decode 90 frame from IQON, and that's a special kind of frame which has no bosses. The frame is flat on the inside, and therefore you need separate bearings that are having the extension to replace the bosses of the inside of the frame, which are not there in the Decode frame. And that means that you have a very limited choice of bearings. Now I was wondering, since I was having some issues with finding the bearings for three wheels, it's difficult, and there are cheaper bearings. Maybe I don't know if it's really necessary to spend the money, or maybe I want to have better bearings. I'm not sure. I could install normal bearings as well by adding washers to the wheels next to the bearings, but that's a little bit more difficult, and so I wanted to know, is it worth doing that or not? And therefore I tried to test it by an experiment, and then by doing a comparison between my two skates when just skating myself. I would be able to feel the difference between the left and right skate if I put the Decode Gold bearings on the left side and the ABEC9 from Wicked on the right side. And the ABEC9, I chose that because it came with my skates, and it's a good bearing. I guess it's respected by many people, I think, as a good bearing. So I think it should be kind of a reference. Well, it should serve as a reference for if the Decode bearing compares to that well, then that should mean it's also a good bearing. I guess that's my assumption. So this video is the follow-up where I'm going to share my results and discuss my findings. Then I also have to say that the ABEC9 bearings I use are very new. I skated on them maybe twice, 3 times at most. While on the Decode Gold bearings I've been skating maybe for a year now, like every week. But I've been treating them well. I've been skating on the inside and dry, of course. If I went outside, it was also dry there. And I cleaned them once, pulled them apart, cleaned all the balls, put them back together again. And I don't have any complaints about them. So still, they're not new anymore, and therefore I was expecting the comparison to come out with finding that there was no difference. Otherwise, if there would be a difference, then you can still say it's not because of the bearings. It's because of it's not the quality of the bearing. It's just that I've been using it for a year now, and therefore it's not good. But I was expecting not to find much difference. But I was also prepared to be surprised, and so I was also curious myself what would happen. Actually, that's the reason I did it, because I wanted to know, does it really matter? In my previous video of installing the bearings and the wheels, I showed how the wheels were spinning, and you could clearly see that the wheels with the bearings, the Decode bearings, were not spinning very well. It's like there's something people call the spin test. A lot of skaters are showing that in YouTube, where they just give a spin to the wheels and then count how long it spins, and that's supposed to represent how good the bearings are. And if you would take that measure, then these bearings are really crappy, because as you can see there, they don't spin very well here at home. And well, if you look at the spin result of the ABEC9 bearings from Wicked, they spin quite a lot longer. So that would say that should, like, apparently, according to the theory of the spin test, it should mean that it's it's going to be much better skating on the Wicked bearings than on the Decode. And I already questioned this in an earlier video, because first of all, the low temperature, it's not the temperature that they will be when you're using them, and the different bearings will have different lubrications. I lubricated these with some special lubrication for skates, but it was a thick grease. It was a gel, and if it's cold, then the gel is a bit viscous. Well, in the Wicked bearings, it seems like there's just oil and very thin, much thinner lubricant. So that is the reason probably that they spin much more, not because of the quality of the hardware. But anyway, that's also something I wanted to test in this experiment. So my first findings were already that after skating for a couple of minutes, I did the spin test again for both skates, for both bearings, and you can see the way that they spin now is very different from how it was when they were cold in my at my desk. Just by skating on them a little bit, the temperature, I guess, went up in the bearing, and the lubricant became more viscous, and now they spin a lot better. So that's already a difference that you have to take into account when you do a spin test. Are you really testing it objectively? Are you just testing it in a situation where you actually use the skate, or are you testing them cold? Are you comparing the properties of the lubricant at the temperature at which you are not actually going to use it when you skate? But even then, you can still see, well, of course the Wicked bearings are also warmed up, and they spin even better now than the Decode still. So there's still a difference between the two, clearly, in how they spin. But that still doesn't mean that it matters for the resistance during skating. And even if there's a difference, whether this difference would be compared to all other resistance during skating, is it actually significant enough to make a difference? So that is what I wanted to find out. For myself, it would have been enough to actually just skate around and feel the difference between my left and right foot. And that was what I was doing. I did some cross rolls, which is very nice exercise. I like, which I find useful for practicing my outer edges, which have always been kind of a weak spot for me since the beginning. And also during another further practice of the grapevine. But then during practice and the whole session, I just forgot about having two different bearings on my skates. It just didn't, I didn't notice any difference, and therefore I just stopped thinking about it, and it was not an issue anymore. But still, I wanted to be able to also share and also be more objective about the difference between the bearings. So I was thinking about how can I have an experiment where I objectively compare the two bearings side by side in a way that you can actually see the difference. After trying out a couple of glides on one foot, I found out that if I push off on one side of the garage, I would actually be able to glide all the way to the other side, and exactly at the end I would run out of speed. So I got the idea that maybe I can just compare the two bearings by pushing myself off once and then keep gliding until the end of the garage, and then see how fast I go, or how far I come. And then after a couple of tries, I found out that actually for both skates I could reach the end of the garage at the same point. Only I wanted to kind of measure it more accurately. So what I did is I drew lines between all the pillars, and that gives a comparison between the different runs, where you can see at each point during the run if the two different runs are comparable, if the two different bearings are following the same path, the same distance and the same speed. The way I synchronized different runs side by side is by looking at the moment where my back foot, which is pushing me off, is leaving the ground. So as soon as I lift it from the ground, that's the point where I would synchronize the two videos with each other to have exactly the same starting moment. I was hoping that by pushing as hard as I could without slipping, I would be able to have the same push on the left and the right foot, and therefore it should be comparable between the two sides. And my thinking was that, well, I'm using the same piece of ground, so it should have the same resistance. And therefore, if I find that point at which I can push as hard as I can without slipping, then it should both be the same for both feet, and it should give me the same speed initially. And then in the end, the difference would only be because of the difference in resistance of the bearing. Unfortunately, I've had some trouble pushing with my right foot more than I had with my left foot. It seems like I had a stronger push on my left foot, because when I tried to push with my right foot, it would slip away much quicker. I'm not sure if it's because of the way my feet are different. Maybe I'm less able to push well with one foot in comparison to the other. Or there's a difference in resistance of the wheels, maybe, or maybe the way I'm holding my foot. I'm not sure, but there seemed to be a difference in the quality. So I try to be as gradual as possible in my push, and push as long as I could without slipping away. And then I after many different repetitions, I took for both sides. I took the fastest run of each, and then I put them side by side here. But as you can see, in the end, the Wicked had a faster run than the Decode bearing. So that is a bit difficult to say why it is, but without comparing more between the two, because yeah, you can always say it's because of the bearing, or it's because of the push, or because of the difference between the wheels. So if there's a difference, it's difficult to explain and to come to a conclusion. Well, I was hoping that they would end up the same, so that there wouldn't be this question like, okay, there could be two different things, two different factors that are countering each other, but it would be a very low likelihood compared to when there's a difference. It would be much more likely that it can be many different things. So yeah, I was a bit sad, a bit disappointed about the results, to have a difference. But then I started thinking, like, how can I figure out what is the cause of the difference? So then I drew all these lines between the pillars, and then I could more easily compare between the two runs, and not just the end time, but also in the middle. Because if the difference is because of the resistance, then that would mean that in the beginning of the run, the two sides should be very similar, and then at the end they should only differ at the end, basically, not in the middle. But if you compare them side by side, you see between the two sides, and then compared to the blue lines, you can see that already quite early on there's a significant difference visible between the two sides. So that told me that I think it's more likely that the difference is, or at least part of it, is coming from having a faster push from the start. So I was thinking, well, maybe I should either maybe do it again with the wheels, the bearings on the other side, or I don't know, finding a ramp, which I don't have, to push myself through gravity instead of using friction and my leg strength and way of pushing. That could be more objective, but that would be a bit difficult for me to do. But then I came up with another idea. I found out after measuring all different runs that I had another run with the Wicked ABEC9 side, where I had exactly the same end time and exactly the same end point as the fastest run with with the Decode Gold bearing. So I started to put them together as well, side by side, and then compare them. Because if the end time is the same, but there's a more resistance of the bearing, then I should be able to find the difference in the middle of the run. Then in the middle you would see that the Decode Gold bearing would be ahead, because it just got a faster push and then had more deceleration because of the more resistance of the bearing. And then in the end they would come to the same time but having a different starting velocity. And it should show up in the difference along the way. But when I compared these runs together, I put them side by side. From start to end they were the same moment because of the synchronization of the start and the fact that they end up at the same time. And then in the middle I could see for every line they were lining up perfectly. So this told me that actually in this case I would have probably pushed myself the same amount on both sides. In the beginning I was trying to get better at pushing, better and better at pushing. So at the end the last run of the Decode Gold bearing was faster than an earlier run with the Wicked bearing. Or at least some of them were kind of comparable, and then this one was actually exactly the same. So I think I finally came up with a side-by-side comparison which is kind of objective and shows me, okay, I was a bit biased because I was hoping that they were the same, but I think it's quite clear that they are exactly the same throughout the whole run. And therefore, for me, this kind of concludes the issue. For me, I don't think I don't see a reason for me to do more experiments. I think, for me, this is a closure of the topic. Even though the Decode bearing was older, I used it more. It was a bit warm, maybe, but still, even then, it does the same. There's no noticeable difference for me. I don't feel any difference, and I don't measure any difference between the glides. So my conclusion from all this testing is that whichever bearing is easier to get or easier to use and not much more expensive, that's the one I will use, which is currently still the Decode Gold bearing. I think I will still continue to use that, even though maybe I can find cheaper bearings, but it's more hassle to put the washers in between, and therefore I think I don't know if it would be worth it eventually. But at least now I don't feel really bad about being stuck to the Decode Gold bearing. Apparently it doesn't matter much for me. Maybe, of course, if you're doing speed skating, you're doing competitions, every millisecond that you can gain will be welcome. So it makes sense to try to get the best bearing you can, but for normal free skating, recreational skating, wizard skating, aggressive skating, I don't think that you have to worry about the bearings. That's my conclusion, at least from what I have tried in this experiment. Maybe later on I would try something else, or maybe something else comes up. Somebody else does an experiment that I see on YouTube that gives me doubts, but so far I don't see any evidence that at least between these bearings that it makes a difference. Well, maybe the ABEC9 from Wicked is just very good, and the Decode Gold bearing is also very good, and there are also other bearings that are not so good. So it's still worth comparing to other bearings in the future. But for now, I don't really worry about it anymore, and I focus more on my skating and the wheels, the things that I think are more important. I hope you found it useful to see the comparison that I did. Or if you think that I should have done something different, let me know in the comments. But in any case, I really want to thank everybody who's been supporting this channel by watching my videos and commenting and liking. Yeah, so far I've got already 250 subscribers to this channel, so it's telling me that apparently I'm doing things that other people are also appreciating, which is really great. I'm quite happy, and also doing this gives me quite a support in my own skating, because it's like I'm not skating on my own now. I've got also people who are still see what I'm doing and are supporting it, and feels like an encouragement to me to continue skating. But even just skating by itself, I find it really nice to do anyway. So I'm really happy that I started skating, and also happy that I'm sharing this with others, and I want to thank you for all your support. The video about the power slide lunge entry is coming. I thought this was a bit more urgent because I already did the other video and I wanted to follow up. I saw a couple of subscribers since then, so I thought maybe they are expecting to see the results of this bearing comparison. So therefore I did this first, but I really want to finish the video on the lunge turn entry to the power slide. So hopefully that is coming in a couple of weeks. So hope to see you then. Bye.